Welcome to another edition of Ortho Innovators. I'm Dan Cook with ORTHOWORLD, and I'm excited to be joined by Cambre Kelly, Chief Technology Officer at restor3D and CEO of Reselute, a startup focused on treating implant infections. Hello, Cambre. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So tell me about your journey first to restor3D. You did your undergraduate work at Georgia Tech and then continued at Duke to get your Ph.D. in biomedical engineering. What drew you to or attracted you to 3D printing, specifically porous lattice structures with orthopedic applications?
Yeah, so I started my career in orthopedic device development when I was an undergrad at Georgia Tech. I worked for a couple Atlanta-based medical device startups that were spin-outs of Georgia Tech academic technology from the lab of Ken Gall,
Mhm.
and ultimately really fell in love with the space of translating academic research-based technologies into commercial products in the ortho space. And then ultimately ended up at Duke working on 3D printing at a time where metal 3D printing in particular, laser powder bed fusion, was really just starting to explode in the literature and really was something that was being looked at for mechanical and structural applications and as kind of an academic application, but not really specifically in orthopedics. And it was an area that we saw an opportunity to learn more and do some really great research, and ultimately found restor3D around that technology.
That's awesome. And you're in your seventh year?
We celebrated 7 years in July. We had
That's awesome.
a pretty great birthday party. We had some patients come in and speak to the team who we've helped. That was really impactful for the team to get to hear directly from the patients that we've provided personalized devices to and the impact it's made on them. And then we went bowling. So it was a very fun day for us.
The important part, right?
Yeah.
Um, can you talk about, you've done so much in 7 years as a company. Can you just talk about that, the growth trajectory and, just your current capabilities and future plans and just, when you look back on it, are you amazed at what you guys have accomplished?
Yeah, when you're down in the weeds, solving problems all day, every day, sometimes you forget how much we've done in a short period of time. So, events like our, yearly birthday party or other things where we can kind of zoom out and take a step back are definitely pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we started, at a benchtop in a research lab at Duke University and built up the company, from that lab bench to an incubator space at Duke. And then we moved into our first facility in Durham that was about 7,000 square feet of manufacturing and R&D space. And then we quickly outgrew that and moved into our now home in RTP, Research Triangle Park in Durham. That is a state-of-the-art manufacturing and R&D facility, as well as our facility up here in Boston, Massachusetts, which is the former Conformis facility that's,
Yeah.
again, manufacturing and R&D. So we've kind of absolutely exploded from a space and a headcount standpoint and a product line offering. It's really cool to see how much we've grown, but to also reflect that the vision is still very much the same vision that we started the business with. How do we use 3D printing and other, advanced technologies to enable personalization in orthopedics and impact patients and provide better clinical outcomes? And that's really what we started out doing and what we continue to do today, just on a much larger scale, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. And pulling out too, you've seen to a bigger picture view, you've also seen the evolution of 3D printing in general, not just your company. Can you give me, the broad strokes of where we are? I think there's awareness growing. Certainly, more orthopedic companies are interested in it. Where are we now and compared to where you started and just give me a sense of what the current capabilities are in orthopedics.
Yeah, it's crazy to see how much the technology has evolved. When we started, researching and working in this space in 2016, 2017, we had one of the first laser powder bed fusion systems from 3D Systems that was landed in the US. And that's what I did all of my PhD research on, that machine, parts produced on that machine. And now we've, exploded in the Durham facility. We've got, quad laser systems that are, state of the art, really focused on kind of build plate capacity and overall, laser efficiency. And so the focus is kind of, it started in looking at what was the resolution and the parts that we could make, a lot about lattice structures and things like
Mhm.
that, and now is really evolving towards productivity and
Mm.
reproducibility and uptime and things around truly having scalable manufacturing. And so it's been interesting to watch the industry shift and the manufacturers of all the different, printer systems kind of shift in reaction to kind of the maturation of the space and the customer's needs, which has been pretty cool.
That's awesome. And you talked about, scalability and the production side of things. What are some of the barriers that are maybe have prevented scaling up that have been overcome, and what's still left to do?
Yeah, I think specifically on the printing side, a lot of the barriers in the early days and still even now is that these machines are not plug and play, right?
Hmm.
And so I think a big misconception for those that are, curious about the space or haven't quite entered it is that I can just go buy a laser system or really any sort of 3D printer, plug it in my facility and start making parts, right? And that's
Sure.
just really not the case, particularly in medical device where our specifications are focused not only around the mechanical and the fatigue performance of the parts, but also really detailed specifications around the lattice and other geometrical tolerancing. So I think that that's still something that we've definitely gotten better. And at restor3D, we've, built a lot of tribal knowledge around how to make great parts. But I think that that's something that the space in general is still trying to get behind. I think we've done a great job as an industry building a Rolodex of ASTM standards and other standards to reference, building good communities to have discussions around these sorts of challenges and roadblocks as an industry together and in collaboration with FDA. So I think we've definitely made really good strides there. Um, and then, I think thinking about kind of the overall, part pathway for manufacturing, we
Yeah.
print a lot of things, but then we ultimately need more post-processing on a lot of the parts, whether it's machining or other additional operations. And so thinking about like how do you design the part, start to finish, not only how it's going to come off the printer, but how is it ultimately become that final finish good is still something that I think a lot in the industry are kind of working through challenges around that, optimal workflow.
Sure. Um, and as a company, you brought stuff in-house, right? You integrated it. Talk about first the growing pains of that, but also what you've realized by doing it, years later. I'm sure there's still improvements to make, but what an advantage that is.
Yeah, it's been hugely advantageous for us. It was a decision we made very early in the business
Hmm.
to insource our manufacturing and own that. And a big part of that decision at the time was because we were control freaks in the best way possible. We
Sure.
knew that these systems weren't plug and play, like I said, and that there were a lot of optimization that needed to be done around the print parameters. And we wanted to be able to control that and control the quality of the devices that were being made. And then we kind of, vertically integrated from there. So in our facility in Durham, we can go from powder to packaged part completely within the four walls of our manufacturing facility, which is, an awesome thing for us to be able to do. And it's hugely valuable to us from a lead time perspective that we can produce parts as fast as 72 hours if we absolutely had to for a traumatic indication or another urgent case. But has allowed us to have, industry leading lead times in general on our products.
And is that going to lead to, there's a huge push in orthopedics for more personalized medicine. Is that part of it? Just chopping that lead time down to um, maybe hours, days? I don't know what the potential is, but is that huge part of this movement?
Yeah, any of my team that's listening to this in the future is going to hate me if I say, yeah, that's the goal to get us to hours, as our standard lead time. That's definitely not the
Sure.
intent. In certain indications, we might need that. And
Yeah.
certainly different areas of orthopedics have kind of different lead time mandates, right? So anything from, 3 to 6 to 8 weeks might be appropriate depending on how far out a surgeon is scheduling.
Yep.
And our, ultimate goal is to be able to accommodate that lead time variability for different product lines and different practices needs. But ultimately that's, part of the challenge of how we're working to scale up and take on more volume, but maintain fast enough lead times to support these personalized devices in the standard orthopedic surgeon's practice.
Gotcha. Um, can you just hit on some of the advantages of additive manufacturing, the production of lattice structures, porous lattice structures that allow for better bone ingrowth, better fixation. And how is that evolving? What's coming down the road along that front? How's that improving patient outcomes?
Yeah, so at restor3D, we have our title technology platform, which is our porous lattice structure that is a sheet-based architecture. It's very different than any of the other structures that you'll see from other manufacturers that are 3D printing their devices. This is what I did my PhD research on
Mhm.
at and it optimizes surface area. And it has the highest mechanical properties of any of the lattice structures that we studied in our in-depth research relative to strut-based architectures and other things. The other really important part of that technology for us is that it's a very organic structure.
Hmm.
And so it lends itself very well to these patient-specific devices that have anatomically matched surfaces that aren't planar in nature, right? We've got some really crazy curvatures for different parts that we produce for limb salvage patients, for example, and our lattice easily kind of drops onto those organic surfaces and allows for, the most bony contact between the lattice surface and whatever we're reconstructing. So for us, we continue to do extensive research on that technology. We've got a couple animal models in play right now where we'll be able to show data around the osseointegrative strength of that technology relative to other surfaces. And then we have, plans for clinical studies around these porous devices as well.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, the other thing 3D printing allows for is just maybe capitalizing on some of the digital design tools. Talk about how that's impacting your work and also, tying in surgeon feedback, who might be contributing to some of these designs and maybe the greater collaboration between them and your engineers.
Yeah, I think that's part of what is the magic in this space. So
Mhm.
I said before, we can go from powder to packaged part inside our manufacturing facility, but truly our full vertical integration is from CT to packaged part, right?
Mhm.
So we receive in DICOM images from a patient preoperatively. We have the indication and kind of other design inputs from the surgeon that help our engineers say, what are they trying to achieve for this patient? And then our engineers get to work segmenting that file from the 2D slices into a 3D model of the patient's anatomy. And then oftentimes they get on a Zoom call like this with a surgeon and have what we call a design call, where the engineer is driving the screen, showing the preoperative anatomy. Most of the time comes together with kind of a preliminary plan to bounce off the surgeon to say, hey, I think you might want to make bony resections here and here, and you might
Mhm.
want to try to, correct this deformity. What do you think? Or, go from there. And then the surgeon and the engineer will iterate. And it's a pretty cool, collaboration to watch the surgeon and the engineer start to mind meld and figure out what
Yeah.
they want to do for that patient. And then we take all of that offline and actually finalize the implant and instrumentation design, send that over in a surgical plan for the physician to review and approve. And then we get to work making the parts and getting them into their hands for surgery. So it's a pretty cool process end to end,
Awesome.
and has been enabled by a lot of the digital design tools that really have just kind of come to market here in the last few years, and a lot of things that we have developed internally with our internal software teams as well.
Do you see surgeons getting excited about this potential? I mean, it must be fun for them to kind of dive into the design phase too.
Yeah, no, I think for a lot of surgeons, it's really fun to jump on a design call and to kind of, mind meld with the engineers, like I said, and play engineer a little bit
Yeah,
themselves. A lot of orthopedic surgeons have engineering undergrad degrees, right? So
sure.
that's for them, it's sometimes fun to kind of come back to those principles and, think of the way that they were trained in their undergraduate programs too. So it's definitely very fun to see, particularly for some of the really complex cases where
Yeah,
there's a lot of thought that goes into those. Those calls are pretty intricate and pretty cool to see.
that's cool. Tell me about your work at Resolute. It's I think that's an exciting opportunity, and tell me what the company's doing and why you're taking on that challenge.
Yeah, so that's another business that we started in 2021.
Yeah.
We spun that out of Duke University. That was technology that we've licensed in from Duke focused on a proprietary reservoir technology for eluting antibiotics or really any therapeutic locally. And really, it was kind of a product of some of the challenges that I've seen and some of my colleagues have seen in the orthopedic space for, years, where there really haven't been great solutions for dealing with infections locally.
Yep.
Standard of care right now, we're focused on trauma at Resolute right now, but this is kind of true across orthopedics, is a lot of systemic antibiotics and kind of chronic suppression with antibiotics. And we just thought there's got to be kind of a better way to do this. And a lot of surgeons are MacGyvering solutions on the back table. And so we think that it's
Yeah.
time to bring a better solution and build a better mousetrap. And that's what we're trying to do. Obviously, because it has antibiotics, it's a combination product under FDA's purview. And so we're working through a lot of the regulatory aspects of the
Sure.
product and the design right now. But we're pretty excited about the technology and what we're working on and really trying to provide better clinical solutions in the space.
How's the CEO chair treating you? You like it?
It's great. I've
Yeah.
got a small team and we wear a lot of different hats. Some days I'm the accountant, most of the days I'm paying invoices and sometimes they let me do a little bit of science, which is fun.
There you go. That's awesome. Um, so what, first restor3D and then now Resolute, what is it about startups or small companies that excite you? It's obviously something you're been involved in your entire professional career and it seems like you love it. What is it about it?
Yeah. Well, so I spent some time in startups when I was in college, and then I
Okay.
actually went and worked in technology consulting for a few years before I ended up back at Duke. And so working for a company of 300,000 didn't work out very well for me. I didn't
Okay.
last very long in that business. So it's, something I tell young engineers in the space is it's important to learn the things that you don't like doing, and that's
Yeah.
okay
Yeah.
to
It's great
try
advice.
something and say, not only am I maybe not good at it, but I also don't enjoy doing it, right? And
Yeah.
so I gravitated back to I love working in a small company with a motivated team and an innovative technology that's solving a real problem. I love doing it in our space because the impact that we have on patients is incredible to see, and a huge part of what our team is motivated by at restor3D is we have the privilege of knowing, these patients on a personal level because the devices we're providing to them are personalized, right? And it's incredibly exciting to get to meet a patient face to face, like we got to do earlier this year, and shake their hand and understand the impact that we've had on their life. And at Resolute, I know the clinical problem we're solving is massively unmet need,
Yep.
and that's something that gets me out of bed and gets me excited every day.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you, Cambria. I really appreciate the time. We'll leave it there. And, again, thank you for your insights and it was great talking to you.
Thanks.